Welcome to this season's debut episode of Fourth and Goal. I'm your new host, former Carlisle Sentinel sports editor Jake Adams, here with the man, the myth, the legend, Andy Shay. And we're here each week through the rest of the high school football season to break down everything going on in the Mid-Penn Conference and the Colonial Schuylkill League for Fourth Down Magazine, bringing you some of the game's biggest names and maybe having a few laughs along the way. So we'll dive right in here today. Hey, Shay, hello, how you doing?
Old guy alert. Letting the old guy join you. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. I'm excited for the season. I'm actually excited to do this with you because I know from all the good work you do and what you've done. And I'm like, you can talk about high school football in Central Pennsylvania still. Let's do this together. So I'm pumped for the season, and I'm excited for our first guest. We've got Ian Goodling, wide receiver,
Yeah.
record-breaking wide receiver from West Perry. He'll be joining us in a bit. So excited to have him. Each week we're going to bring a guest on, talk a little bit about some comings and goings, some moving and shaking, and what we think in high school football in the Mid-Penn Conference and Colonial Schuylkill League. And that's about it. Check us out.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm glad to be working with you again a little bit. Even from a distance, it's nice to be involved with Mid-Penn coverage a little bit again. But we don't need to navel gaze too much. This is about the players, the coaches, the teams
Right.
that we cover. We could talk about ourselves all day and we have stories to share, I'm sure. But let's get into the topics. We have a couple things to talk about here before Ian jumps on. Figure we kind of can look back a little bit and spin some things forward, talk about what's going on, what's the trending stuff right now in the Mid-Penn. We'll focus a little bit Mid-Penn heavy today. We'll start right now with the biggest game of the weekend, and I know it's a few days ago at this point, but Big Spring winning the Little Brown Jug. I've covered that game. Shay, I know you've covered a bunch of those games before too. Big Spring never wins. They never won while I was there in Carlisle, and they beat the mighty Shippensburg Greyhounds for the first time since 2010. So, let me hear your thoughts on that.
So the last time the Bulldogs won the Little Brown Jug, we didn't even you didn't even know what a spread offense was at the high school level. I mean, that's just the truth. And an offensive huddle before a play, that was still a thing the last time the Bulldogs won the Little Brown Jug. But, I mean, good for Big Spring. This game was clearly on a more level playing field. That was clear going into the game. That it was maybe a 55-45. You have to put Shippensburg as a favorite because they had won a
Yeah.
dozen times in a row. But the Greyhounds just don't have that firepower offensively that has carried them to many a victory over the last, say, 7 to 10 years. Um, do they even still have a place for it in the Big Spring High School trophy case? I'm just asking. It's just a thought because after 12 years, you're like, did we forget where that goes in there? I'm sure there was still a place for it. But good for the Bulldogs is what I say.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they renovated that high school or built a huge extension on it or something since the
Correct?
last win. So, where it was before probably is not where it resides now. But hey,
Did they have a place for it? That's my
yep.
question. Did they have a spot for it? This is where, when we win it, the Little Brown Jug will go.
But we're not here to be fans of any particular team, but congrats to Big Spring. That's a big, big win for them. This is that Super Bowl for those two communities most years. To slay the giant, to slay the Goliath is a huge deal, especially so early in the season. So that's great. It's going to bring some juice to the rivalry again for the next few years. Shippensburg's really going to be angry about this next year, but that's 365 days from now. We don't have to worry about that right now. So upsets, big takeaways, surprises so far. That kind of leads into my next question here, Andy. We're 2/3 of the way through the non-conference slate, non-division slate, non-league slate, depending on what you want to call it, where most of the Mid-Penn is not playing. Well, none of the Mid-Penn is playing anything in their division. So far, what's been your biggest takeaway 2 games in?
Yeah. The three teams in the Capital Division, the three-horse race, I'm talking about Steel High, Trinity, and West Perry, that might be better than advertised. And we knew coming in that this was a trio of teams that was going to be something to watch, and it was going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see how it plays out. But to me, after 8 quarters, I think each of these teams, this is a trio of teams that are either already elite or absolutely borderline elite right now.
Yeah.
And those three teams are going to slug it out. And the fact that they're in sort of different levels, district wise, I think that's makes it even cooler. You got a 1A, a 2A, a 3A.
Yeah.
And so they're not like, sort of beating each other up and harming each other in the process in terms of the postseason. But I just think how that plays out is going to be fascinating to watch because, man, those three teams are good. They are really good.
Yeah.
So
I,
that's
I
grabbed me. That's my biggest takeaway so far.
I remember last year, I moved to Louisville and I'm working there, but I'm keeping tabs on what's going on in the Mid-Penn because I was in the area for so long and helping out fourth down a little bit with stuff. And so I was able to see the names and things. And Trinity making a state semifinal last year, like, stunned me. That was they never made the playoffs while I was there. Like that was a team that always was struggling to get to 500. West Perry, Bob Bowden's done a fantastic job there. Steel High's been Steel High for most of the last 10, 15 years. We know what
Correct.
they're capable of. And yeah, at the beginning of the season, our Andy Sandrick wrote that Steel High was the #1 team in the preseason rankings for this division. Looked
And they
like,
should have been.
yeah, it looked like they were gonna, I shouldn't say run away because like we've established, Trinity and West Perry are really, really good teams. But if there was a team going to go undefeated in the division, it was going to be them. At this stage, with what we're seeing, I want to put you on the hot seat for a second. Do you
Uh,
think Steel High is going 2-0 now, or do you see one of those two teams knocking them off? 2-0 against those two teams.
I I I struggle to see any one of them going 2-0 against each other. I really do. I think the margins are tighter than we might have thought. And yeah, no, they're still the favorite. Steel High's still the favorite in my book. They've earned that right, and they're the team that's performed and done it the best at the highest of levels. And when the bright lights are on, they seem to show up at a different sort of speed, pace, and level. But man, Trinity and West Perry, if there's a gap, they've closed it. And if there's an opening, it seems like they're set up to find it. And that's not a knock on Steel Eye. It just means their excellence is being sort of aspired to. And I
Yeah,
can't see any one of those teams going 2-0. I really can't. I think it's going to be beat each other up.
that's going to be really fun to watch when
It
those teams
is.
start to face each other. And as we've established, no knock on Steel High. If I'm a fan, I want these teams to be really good because it's going to make me more excited to go on Friday night and see them,
Oh,
and I'm going to be screaming that much more.
yeah, absolutely.
So,
Steel High doesn't care. If there were five teams that were good, they wouldn't care.
yep,
They would still
yeah.
think they're the best and they're going to beat them all. That's just the way they should think. Yeah, they
So,
they love it.
so next question for you here is what or who, open-ended question here, has been the biggest surprise for you? Again, we're just 2 games into the season, but
Yeah.
what's surprised you?
So I'm I'm going to surprise you with my answer. It's Bishop McDevitt being 2-0.
Oh, okay.
Like really, they played St. Joe's Prep from Baltimore. I think it was a 9-win team from a year ago that lost some talent, but they're really well coached and they know how to they restock
Yeah.
and a road game at DePaul Catholic. And everyone thinks, when you look at those two opponents closely, if you looked at them closely, and you would think, oh, well, McDevitt's the defending state champs. They have an FBS 2-year starter quarterback and an FBS recruit at wide receiver. Just pencil the Crusaders in for 2-0. Yeah, don't forget, those two teams that they played were really, really good.
Hmm.
And Bishop McDevitt has an entire cast of greenhorns up front on the offensive line. They're pretty much all new guys, and they have new backs in the backfield. Their best overall player on defense is gone in that James Madison, and there's more parts on the defensive side of the ball. But when I looked at it preseason, I'm like, whoa, that's a motherload with what they had to work with, and what it's not just what they have, it's the other components. I was like 1-1 would be a really good start. And I didn't think 2-0 was realistic. So for them to find a way, and they found a way to win both games in the fourth quarter,
Yeah, they did
coming
not
from
run away with them.
behind, right? They came behind and won both games in the fourth quarter. And against DePaul Catholic, They scored with like 8.5, 9 minutes to go and made that like 1 point cushion stand or 2 point cushion or whatever it was. They made that stand up. So not losing either one of those games and the way they did it, that's a really good sign for them because we know in the Keystone Division, once they hit the Mid-Penn schedule, it's not going to be, much. It's not going to be very competitive. That's just no other way to say it.
Yeah.
And it's still too early for me to look at some of those teams that are 2-0 right now who were maybe a little bit down last year. It's too early to say whether or not they're a surprise, really. So I'm just going to stop there and say what Bishop McDevitt's done and how they've done it. That is a big surprise to me with what they started working with, even though we know what their known quantities are.
Gotcha. I'm gonna pull a faux pas here in journalism and do a bad segue here, but we're gonna circle back to Mid-Penn Capital here a second because we've got a guest coming on in a minute here who's from this team.
Sure.
West Perry's in the midst of one of its best multi-year stretches in program history, maybe the best, up for debate. Andy, I want to ask you this. You've been around a little bit longer than I have. I won't date either of our careers, but is this the best team you've seen from Elliotsburg or no?
I am going to hedge a little bit and say potentially maybe.
Okay.
Now, so keep in mind, I date back to 1992 in the Mid-Penn Conference. So I only have 30 years. I don't go back to the 60s and I'm not in the 70s. And I know this West Perry team has some lofty expectations and they should. And they're part of that fantastic trio that we talked about just a bit ago. But that 1999 team, that 98 and 99 teams, they were led by running back Musa Smith. They had the best offensive line I've ever seen come out of Elliotsburg. They had some serious thunder and heavy hitters on defense. That was the best West Perry team I've ever seen. That District 3 championship game in 1999 with Manheim Central, I covered it. It was 28-21, and it was a toss-up game the entire way. That Mustangs team was a championship caliber team that just didn't finish the championship game in the exact way you needed to win a district championship, and Manheim Central knew how to do that. That was the only difference. So this one's close, but for me, it's still the 1999 team.
Speaking of the Mustangs, let's welcome our special guest this week. On Friday, he broke West Perry's career receiving yards record of 2,168 set by Chase May exactly 10 years ago. He currently stands at 2,284 and could easily push that number to 3,000 by the end of the season. His QB is Marcus Quaker. He's his favorite target. Welcome to the pod, Ian Goodling.
Thank you.
So Ian, Andy and I got a couple questions for you here. First, congratulations so far on a 2-0 start to the season. You guys have been playing great coming off of last year's really strong 2022 as well. I want to circle back first with you to last week and talk about that record-breaking catch. Do you remember that play? Did you know going in like this could, the next catch is the one, the next yards are the ones that I need? And can you break down what that play was, what you saw on the field, anything like that?
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know I was in the potential to break a record until after the game I figured it out that I broke it. But yeah, I don't keep my eyes towards records or anything. I just got there to play the game I love.
So I guess my follow-up would be what was that feeling like when you did find out then?
No, I was definitely excited, but I mean a record just a name on the board, doesn't really mean much to me. It just I still gotta go out there and play the best of my ability every game. It doesn't just stop now that I have the record.
Okay, Ian, if you eclipse 3,000 yards, then you can celebrate a little bit because 3,000 yards that's a big number if you get to that. But so Jake asked you about the latest catch and the one that set the record, which is now going to just be padded yards. My first question's harder. Do you remember your first varsity catch? And if so, can you recount or recall what you remember about it and who it was against or any of that stuff? Do you remember it?
I don't remember my first one, but I remember my first big one, which was against Waynesboro my freshman year on, I believe it was our sideline. It was a hitch and go, and I caught it and got drilled by the safety. And it was right near the end of the game, and we needed a first down in order to run out the clock. I just remember making that catch and Coach Bowden, I think, pulled me by my shoulder pads and basically just like ripped me up to my feet.
He can be pretty intense. So kind of sticking with that theme here, a little bit of memorable plays. So far, three plus years into your career, what is the top play, whether it's receiving or something else? Because I know you have a lot of roles on this team. What's the top play in your opinion that you've made so far in your career?
I mean, the pick six against Trinity last year, like, I feel like that one just kind of sticks out, especially with how tired I was after I ran it the whole way back.
Can you take us through that one a little bit again?
So it was, I didn't know they were running an out and up at the beginning, but it was, I believe they were running an out and up. And so I just dropped my zone like always. And then the quarterback just underthrew it a little bit right to me. I just ran as fast as I could, tried to read the blocks in front of me that some of our guys are setting, just ran so I could.
Hey, and how long have you and Marcus been playing football together?
Um, it's been a while. I mean, I started my second year of Pee Wees, and we played with each other since the whole way up through.
So at least you would say at least approaching 9 years, probably, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah, that's a long time. So there's a chemistry that comes, with your quarterback and a wide receiver. And with excellence, and because you're both really darn good, you guys have developed into a dynamic quarterback wide receiver combination. But now that you guys have been around a while, you're starting to see some junk. And I'm sure you're starting to see some crazy coverages because teams are going to try and take you away. And I'm sure you've had to learn some things about yourself as a receiver and him as a quarterback to work against some of that junk. I call it junk, but we'll call it interesting defenses to work against. So my question for you, what are you seeing? What do you expect to see the most? What kind of stuff are you seeing? And because teams have to pay attention to you, what kind of stuff are you seeing as a wideout, and what do you do to counter it a little bit?
I mean, they definitely like, you'll hear them like they always line up. They'll be like, "Hey, watch 14 or whatever," and
Mm-hmm.
then I mean, we don't really change much on our side, but it just opens up our other guys that are running different routes on the backside or running across or whatever. It opens them up because they're taking an extra guy to cover me.
So if
So
if you have 10 targets a game, how many times are you in one-on-one coverage where you're like, I am out here by myself? Is it not very often anymore?
You get a couple, and then after I'd say like maybe like six catches, then they normally switch things up a little bit, or maybe
Okay.
even before that. But they normally switch things up about a little bit halfway through, maybe.
I'm going to step away from football for a little bit, and we're going to be the old guys here for a second and ask you a TikTok question here. But what's currently the rabbit hole that you've gone down, or what's in your algorithm right now that you can't stop watching?
It's just all college football highlights from the past week.
It's been a good week. It's a good week of highlights.
I'm definitely not disappointed, that's for sure.
So who's your college squad? Who are you watching? Or do you just watch college football in general?
I just watch in general. I mean, I love myself a good football game. It doesn't matter really who's playing,
Gotcha.
but I love
Did you
upsets too.
Yeah, did you watch TCU in Colorado? Any of that one?
I saw all the highlights from it.
Plenty of highlights to see there.
Uh-huh.
So I want to ask you one more question I want to ask you about a teammate. So I like to ask sort of like, because generally we're going to put star guys on the podcast and guys that are doing great stuff. But I want you to tell me there's like one guy on your squad and he's under everybody else's radar, but he's not under yours. It's like that guy who is doing high level work for your team, but nobody outside of your team really knows it. It could be a guy who's improved over last year. It could be a newbie who's first year varsity, who's standing out in your mind and doing a lot to help you guys. You can't give me three or four. I'm only asking for one. I want you to pick one guy in your squad who's really upped his game this year and is doing really good work for you guys, and tell me why you picked that guy and who he is.
So I'd have to go with Bryce Smith, one of our other receivers on our team. I mean, he just compared to last year, he was like he would mix in a little bit here and there, but this
Right?
year in practice, he's just stepped it up. He's been catching a bunch of balls. It's like he's got stick 'em on his gloves during practice. I swear, he's and during the games and stuff, we're targeting him multiple times. He gets all of like our single routes pretty much. He's been tearing it up lately.
So was he like a younger player last year? Was he like a sophomore or junior and now he's a senior? Or what year is he?
He's the same year as me, so he's gonna be a senior. And
Okay,
then, but we always had Dylan Gutshaw last year. And the
right.
year before that, he was always in front of him. And they would mix in a little bit. Like he would substitute him out if Dylan needed a break or whatever. But he's definitely stepped his game up and starting to come through with his game.
And it's probably clear to you guys on the field that him doing that, your offense is there's more opening up on your offense because he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, he's been doing great out there.
All right, Ian, we're going to put you on a hot seat before we let you go. I got 4 questions. Are you ready?
Yep,
Beach house or lake house? Which one?
Lake House.
A streaming series you're currently watching or something you've watched recently?
I don't even have one. I don't watch like anything.
That's an answer. Give me another team in the Mid-Penn Conference whose uniform combinations catch your eye and you like.
Ooh. I mean, Trinity is green and white. I do like their uniforms just because they're kind of like ours, but they're pretty nice looking.
Yep, I do not disagree. They do have, and green Kelly, that sort of Kelly green and white or that green and white combination is classic. All right, last one. I love this question. It's sheets, and it's as much detail as you like to share or as little detail as you like to share. What is your go-to order when you hit sheets?
I normally just go with the basic Italian sub with mayonnaise, pickles, onions.
Any sides?
I'll get like maybe French fries every once in a while, but normally it's just the sub.
Gotcha.
All right, Jake.
Ian, thanks so much for your time today. It was great getting a chance to catch up with you, get to know you a little bit. Obviously, good luck to you and the Mustangs the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll be paying quite a bit of attention to this team here. So thanks again and good luck.
Yep, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks to Ian Goodling for coming on the show with us this week. Be sure to come back to us next week and see who we've got on the show with Andy and I. A couple final topics here, kind of looking ahead to week 3 and maybe a little bit beyond. Andy, what's your game of the week this week on the slate?
Oh, this one's simple. This is like kindergarten stuff. It's Harrisburg at Manheim Township. 2 teams with legitimate District 3 6A title aspirations and possibly some state pipe dreams, but it's a marquee matchup of the highest caliber. That's all I have to say about it. Both teams are out of the gate strong. Both teams are sort of showing what their weapons are and how they're going to use them on both sides of the ball. I will be interested to the matchup for me in that game is what does Harrisburg's defense do against Manheim Central's offense? That's
Absolutely.
where the rubber meets the road in this game to me. But it's 2 teams that have played 6 quarters of firing on all cylinders. 8 quarters of firing on all cylinders, and now they're going to trade paint. Freaking awesome.
This is why we love non-conference games.
Right.
And then last question for you here before we start to sign off. Who's your player you're keeping an eye on right now, for whatever reason it may be? I think I have an idea.
I want to watch sophomore running back Messiah Mickens from Trinity. The
Where
Shamrocks
did
are
this kid
hosting.
come from?
Yeah, right. The Shamrocks are hosting Why I'm Missing, right? And that in and of itself, with where they are right now, it's just a fascinating non-con game. Love it. But I want to see what he does against the defense at the next level. And I'm not putting a bullseye target on a sophomore who is already committed to Penn State. I'm not saying, oh, I want to see him and see if he can carry Trinity. That's not what I'm saying.
He's already got the bullseye on him too.
I just think I'm fascinated. I want to watch the matchup of him and that T-Rocks offense against the Spartans defense, because we know why Missing's defense is next level. And I think Trinity's offense is really close to being next level. This will be a good test to see it. He's the best offensive weapon on the field, and I want to see what he's got for that defense, not necessarily saying it like, oh, I wonder what Why Missing's defense has for him. I want to see what a next level running back, and he's clearly a next level running back, has for a defense that is clearly next level. That's why I picked him, because you said, give me a player.
I promise next week we won't be
No.
as Mid-Penn Capital heavy, but it's going to be a really hard division to ignore. I don't think it's going to be possible, and that's why we love the Mid-Penn, because it's crazy most years, at least somewhere. But Andy, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for the Fourth Down Magazine team. It's been a good week. It's going to be a good week, I think, week 3 before we head into the division slate. And then, I think that's where the real fun's going to begin. But that's all the time we have this week. For Andy Shay and the Fourth Down Magazine team, I'm Jake Adams. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the games this weekend. If you're going out anywhere, if you're going to stream them, enjoy them as well. Make sure you kick back and relax. And we'll see you next week here on the Fourth and Goal Show.
See ya.